Hello, guys of United Rock Nations. We are in amazing company with Steve Zodiac of Vardis. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yes.
So here we are, of course, to talk about the new live album. But just before, I have some questions about your career, if you agree with that.
Okay.
You record this new live album 40 years after the release of this first album. It was not usual to release a first album, first live album. From where came this idea to work like that?
Well, I think we'd been around maybe 3 or 4 years from leaving school, really, to play live in the clubs and the pubs in England and Northern England, and all the way from Liverpool to Hull to Newcastle upon Tyne down to Birmingham. And we played all these many working men's clubs in those days, and a lot of hard rock fans, obviously, in England, because of so many hard rock bands being British back in those days. And to be fair, even in the pop charts and in the singles charts, in the pop music, you would get quite a lot of heavy rock and hard rock.
Exactly.
Every day, you would hear it every day on the radio, on the BBC. It was everywhere. And we just fell into sort of playing live to start with, as most bands do. And soon we built up a reputation, because most bands who played in those days, the clubs, they played a mixture of rock material from bands like Thin Lizzy or Slade, or,
yes,
all these great, really pop bands as they were seen in those days. Very heavy. Alice Cooper, all these people were in the charts. There were so many to choose from. So most bands played a selection. T-Rex, they were quite heavy at times, my God. And so I had always written music and words, and as I learned to play guitar, I used to write the songs with acoustic guitar. And of course, when we played with the band and we got together and we wanted to sort of play heavy rock, and a lot of these songs, they just turn into these heavy sounding tracks. And so what happened was we ended up sort of slotting a lot of these songs in, things like Situation Negative, for example, is quite an old song, and Move Along. These sorts of songs were quite old, really, when I think back. And the audience were accepting them as part of being a hard rock band. They didn't distinguish between playing, say, a Status Quo track or one of my songs. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. They enjoy the music that I'm writing. And so it ended up where we were playing 80-90% of our set list was Vardis songs.
Yes.
Which was unusual in those clubs and in those days in the pubs. Okay. And that's how really we got these songs established live and worked and crafted and made good live. And it just made sense when we were asked to record the first album, to sort of just capture what we'd been doing and do it as a live album. We never actually thought about, it's going to be the first time anyone's sort of done this as a debut or whatever. It just seemed natural. And that's basically what I think the album is. It's just a raw, natural recording. And in those days, we hadn't really played or recorded in any really professional recording studios. And so that's very different then, a different mindset, a different way of working. And although we demoed some stuff in studios and made a couple of recordings and the first EP and things, it were never the same as playing live. And I wanted to capture the live sound, because all my favorite records, going right back to when I was a small child, really, they always sounded as if the people performing were in the room with you.
Absolutely.
If you see what I mean. They
Yes,
never
absolutely.
sounded like studio recordings. When I was a little
Of
kid,
course.
you know, even the early Beatles records and all that stuff, and of course the Stones, and going even further back to the 50s and the great American Revolution in rock and roll with, you know, Little Richard and the blues records. All these guys were, you know, Chuck Berry, they were massive influence. Even though I was very, very young, from a very early age, I was exposed to this music because my parents, both of them, enjoyed rock and roll and blues and never stopped playing it when I was a little kid. So I was brought up listening to American country blues and
Yes.
all that stuff, you know, even stuff like Hank Williams and stuff, which you wouldn't think could be made into sort of a heavy sounding record. That the songwriting influenced me,
Yes,
put it
absolutely.
that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So then 3 studio albums from 81
Yeah.
to 86. And after that, the breakup. How was your state of mind after the Vigilant album when you decide to say stop?
I think I think what I was getting frustrated with the industry itself, because I don't think people appreciated in sense of management and some of the record labels themselves, that in those days you were very much a commodity rather than a creative artist who wanted to produce something different or something that sounds fresh. And I was sort of getting pushed and pulled into all sorts of directions, and I was getting very frustrated. And I could sense that I was still finding my feet in those days in the studio, and I'd never really been satisfied as a studio artist.
Oh.
I've never really sat well. That I was trying to get this live feeling into the sound of the music. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing those albums, but I just never really felt we had the right producer maybe in those days to help to bring together the vision in my mind that I was trying to achieve with most of what I was doing. Whereas live, it was a lot easier because the three musicians work it out themselves, and it's easy. But once you go in the studio, and the atmosphere in the studio is very alien, it's very cold. All studios are like, you might as well be in a hospital waiting room, you know. It's like, what are we doing here, you know, for Christ's sake. There's nowhere to bounce off the fans, off the atmosphere, you know. And as you know, when you go to a show and the band are playing well and you're all enjoying it, it all becomes one experience, you know. Even if it's a small crowd, that handful of people, it's there, and that comes across in the sound.
Yes,
absolutely. And I could never really get that to happen with some of the studio work, and it was a bit, so I was getting a little bit tired of being told by people that were just looking to, I don't know what the right word is really, maybe it's not exploitation. What it is, all I can say is that SPV Steam Hammer were the right people for me, in the sense now that they're enthusiasts, they enjoy all music. Obviously, they like the Vardis stuff, but they're rock enthusiasts, and there's an element of understanding from these guys who are putting the music out on record. It's a passion for them as well. I never really got that passion from the music industry in those days. You know, they would all seem like old men and just wanting to make count the spreadsheets, you know, and make the money. And it's the money's important, of course it is, but I got disillusioned. Yeah, disillusioned's a good word, maybe to say. And I just thought this is going to be it. And I think you're right. The Vigilante album, to me, when I was redoing some of the tracks to put a newer version out in 2014, I think it was, when we reissued some of it.
Exactly.
I thought, my God, I sound very angry. I'm like, wow, you know, you don't listen to something for nearly, you know, for over 25 years, and you think, oh my goodness, I do sound a pretty angry guy. I was an angry young man.
So then you come back on 2014, as you said, when you remix again Vigilant album. How was your life between 86 and 2014? Any regrets?
No, no regrets at all. I mean, I had a good spell in the industry, and I felt we'd done a lot and enjoyed those years, albeit some of it was very frustrating as professional musicians. And I'd unleashed a lot of the material that came out from me from childhood into the songwriting I'd done. I never stopped playing acoustic guitar and writing poems and songs. So I always did that then as a hobby when I stopped with the band. I sort of went back to education to learn a little bit more about the acoustics and the way sound and music and good music relates to nature and the sounds of nature and how the human brain synthesizes sound. I know this might sound a bit highfalutin now.
No, it's good.
God. And I just feel when I listen to great music, it's the same experience as sitting on the beach with no one there and listening to the sea or the waves, or listening to bird song first thing on the morning. And these emotions and the beauty of sound and the rhythms and the cycles of sound and music, it's the same stuff. Sound in nature is music. It's the same.
Absolutely.
And I think with rock music, it's the same. I think you have that sort of drive, that pulse, you have the passion. And nature is very passionate, and I think rock music is, and that's partly what it is. I think I realized that learning about sound from a more academic side, from studying acoustics and audio electronics, understanding how recording studios capture sound technically, helped me to understand how to then think about recording again in the studio. Now, I sort of went into that to up my sort of understanding, but then ended up developing courses alongside the City and Guilds Institute in London, which is a qualification accreditation organization, and they're sort of world renowned for engineering. So they asked me to get involved along with one of the guys I knew from Air Studios in London called Steve Culnane, and another guy, Pete Suthers from Mayfair Studios, who also now works at the BBC. And because I came at it from a more performance perspective, and those two were sort of purist engineers, if you like, and technical wizards, really, we put together an educational program for the City and Guilds for the City and Guilds to present to colleges all over the world and universities to put these sound engineering qualifications in place. So that, it was a fascinating period, and I spent nearly 20 years doing the education and teaching side of sound and music. So in a way, I was extremely busy, and that really allowed me to overcome the desire to perform, because I was full on with this sort of program to make these courses and to teach and to help young people in coming through a bit more about how to get the best out of recording sound, whether it's for broadcast or for film or TV or theatre, live sound, Foley sound, all this stuff. We included all this in the program. It wasn't just music. And as you probably know, performance is a bit of an addiction, because you get you get this incredible adrenaline shot,
Yes, absolutely.
which is like a natural sort of drug, really, and it is addictive. There's no way around it. I mean, I honestly believe that, you know, it's the same feeling that a footballer gets when they go out on a field, and you again, it can be just amateurs in the park, but you get a buzz going out with your football kit on, and if you score a goal, there's an adrenaline shot like you can't believe. You know, it's that. You know. And
Exactly.
that's the same as you walking on stage and whacking out a big chord and playing and everybody becoming one. And I do have a strong analogy with sports people. And I understand that's why a lot of them can't cope. Because if you think about it, a career in sport, if you get to the age of 35, you start to get, so many great athletes, whether they're boxers, fighters, football players, they can get wobbly and they start knocking back the booze a bit too much and all the rest of it. So you can imagine it's very difficult to come down from performing. And at the end of the day, that's that addiction. And so I was lucky that I'd found another vocation in that the education programs and the opportunity to teach at Westminster College allowed me to focus on that and not feel the need and the pain of having to come down from not performing. So I was lucky in that sense. I must admit that I managed to put another career together in something not completely different. It's linked, but in a way it was satisfying to me, you know.
Absolutely. And what motivated the comeback in 2014? So,
well, again, that was linked to the to the work I was doing with City and Guilds, because about that time, 2012, 2013, they said to everyone working at that institute, we want you all to make a LinkedIn account, because I don't do social media and stuff really. I mean, I'm aware of odd things that go on there when Irene or Fred, my son, shows me something and says, oh, crikey, that's interesting, have a look at that. But I don't actually engage too much, only occasionally if there's a request to do so. But with the LinkedIn thing, I set that up and with City and Guilds, and because my real name obviously was completely different to my stage name.
Absolutely.
It was nobody really realized that was a connection with the Vardis thing. And then one day I got an email from Gary, the original drummer on the 100 Miles. Well, it's not the original Vardis drummer, but the Gary who played on the 100 Mile an Hour album. And he said, are you Steve, who I used to play drums with from Vardis from all those years ago? And I looked at this thing and I didn't know what to do. You know, I'm like, oh no, because I knew then that maybe this was sort of a calling to. And I said to Irene, we were sat at breakfast. I said, gosh, look at this email. I've been emailed from Gary, the old drummer from the 100 Mile an Hour days. And he wants to get in touch. He wants to talk to me about some festival or something that's been asking after us. And I was a bit sort of skeptical, thinking, oh no, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine going on stage again after like nearly 30 years. And I said to her, I don't know what to do. Should I say yes or no? And she said, and Irene was very clever, because what she said is, think about it. She said, if you were a football player, you would have to say no.
Yes, exactly.
She says, but this might give you a little bit of fun and you might enjoy actually getting up there. It looks like people might want to have a listen to you again. And I was just quite stunned then, because I got hold of Gary and in reply, and he said, no, there's like festivals wanting us to go and play and blah, blah, blah. And it just evolved out of that really. And so, yeah, I mean, I was still very sort of skeptical that I would be able to do it, because to be honest, I hadn't played that much electric guitar.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Over all those years, I always kept the old guitars. I've got decent sized collection of old guitars, but I've never really had the desire to crank up the old Telecaster through a Marshall or a Vox. You know, I'd never really bothered with it, and I felt, you know, very, you know, like, oh gosh, could I physically do this again? So there were a lot of question marks. It'd been in contact with Terry, and who was on the Vigilante album. Alan lives happily in New Zealand. He has a small holding out there and raises a few sheep and God knows what. So Alan was, you know, sort of out of the loop a little bit because he was at the other side of the world. But yeah, Terry was still in London, and we said, let's get together and have a jam, and that's what we did. And I said, we'll see how it feels. And you know, there is a funny story to this, because we'd been in the studio having this jam,
yes,
when we first got back together, and I were feeling pretty lethargic and overweight, and I'm not sure. Yeah, we could make the sound, but it was, yeah, it was coming back, but it seemed slow, and we were trying to get these tracks together, and then all of a sudden, I just turned to the guys and I said, you know, just let's have a crack at this one. I said, do you remember Let's Go? And of course they said, yeah, come on. So it went, and it was a dang, dang. And the sound was like, just transported us back maybe, you know, to 85, 84, you know, it was like bang. And, you know, we played that Let's Go from start to finish, perfect. And then I went, we can do this. I felt confident straight. And yet I'd been sort of like this before. It was really weird that doing that sort of track, and that feeling that it sounded just, we sounded like kids again. And that was important to me, because the sound is everything. What we look like is irrelevant, you know, doesn't matter. You know, the sound is the key. So my confidence just flooded back in, and then I said, okay, we'll book another rehearsal and see how it sounds next time. And it went from strength to strength. And then the Brofest people in Newcastle asked us to play, and that was the first sort of comeback. And yeah, it's we got through it well, and it was enjoyed and appreciated, and people enjoyed the music, and that's all you can ask, and it's the main thing about doing it. And I thought, well, why not give this a crack, you know? Let's see if we can go up a gear and get a bit more serious, and that's how we did that. We did the Keep It True festival over in Germany, which was fantastic crowd. That was a bigger festival, and that's where Ollie from SPV was at that show, and he came to have a word with me afterwards and said, you know, he enjoyed it and would I be interested in recording again and so on. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, well. So yeah, I mean, that's how that started, and the momentum was good. We had a good couple of years putting all that together, doing some festivals. SPV very keen to look at a new Vardis record, and so we went into the studio around 2015 to do the recording for the Red Eye album.
It's a Red Eye album.
That's correct. And would you like me to carry on talking about it, or do you want to ask?
Yes, yeah, no, yes, absolutely.
I'll carry on then, yeah, because what happened then is we were doing I'd got the songs, a lot of them new songs. Well, it's 90% of new songs and ideas that I'd toyed with over several years. And it was going really well, and we were really enjoying it and getting the passion in there, and it was really working so well. And then one day in the studio, Terry just said, you know, I don't feel good. It just felt really good. And he sort of just sat down and he said, I said, listen, mate, you need to see a doctor. You don't look well at all. And it was really odd, because from being, well, if you ever met Terry, you'd realize he was like a ball of energy. He bounced off the walls, and when he played as well, he had that passion, you know. So he went for a checkup, and
yes,
they took him in, and they had to do tests and so on, and he had this. They found that there was stomach cancer problem,
absolutely.
and the stomach is a bad place to be unlucky with that, you know.
Absolutely.
And it really rocked us in the wrongest possible way you could rock a band, you know. Like, shit, after all this, you know, we've come so far. And Terry was enjoying it, you know. He really wanted desperate to see the band get another album out. And he'd recorded well. We'd got a lot of the backing tracks done, and the way it works in the studio, you know, you lay down, you're trying to get the best possible bass and drum connection, and, you know, with the guitars and the voices, you can do a lot more afterwards in terms of the tracking of the album and the overdubs of the album. So we did have the main backing tracks almost complete, but then he got sort of held by the hospital, and we didn't know whether he was going to be able to get treatment to recover or not. Nobody sort of knew at that stage. And then one day, I mean, I obviously went to see him every day. I mean, I was living in London at that time. So I was going into St. Stephen's Hospital in Fulham in London every day to see him. And then one day we got took to one side by the specialist who gave us the bad news, and they'd already told Terry. And Terry were fine, you know. He were sitting up in bed and we were chatting. And in fact, we were singing Jolly Roger together, which anyone that knows that track, you know, it's quite a thing to sing with a man that's just been told he ain't got long left. But Terry were like that, you know. He was a smart guy. He had a very, what's the word? He had a perception of life for what it is, and a brilliant man. He loved nature and animals. He had a passion for life, and he basically knew he were going to lose this battle. And me and Joe were very sort of obviously rocked on his heels over the whole thing, and
absolutely, yes,
we couldn't believe what we're going, you know, how to do this. And then one day Terry said, you know, he said, you've got to carry on, you've got to play these gigs, and you've got to finish this album, you've got to do it. He says, promise me you'll do it. My God, when I think about it now, it's staggering, really. And that's the beauty of that guy. He was a beautiful man. He was absolutely wonderful guy, Terry. And so me and Joe, and to this day, I don't know how we got through it. I really don't. You know, that year was just unbelievable. I don't know how we did it. And we managed to keep going, carried on recording. I had to do quite a few vocals and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think we did, under those circumstances, a fine job with Red Eye. And, you know, we do all miss him. And anyone that knew him and played with him in all the bands, and he played with many, many bands. He was a great musician. He dedicated his life to music. He spent 50 years working in music professionally. And you just think, my God, you know, we did get through it. I can't listen to it because I there are many places where I hear Terry, not what he's done. What he's done is great, but I want him to do more backing vocal in places,
Yes,
and
yes.
I can hear the things that are not finished, and that he needed to finish and stuff like that. But no, it's a fine album, and I was
Yes.
pleased we got it as far as we could in terms of completion, and we captured the Vardis spirit within that recording. And I was very pleased with the progress of the Vardis sound in the studio as well. It's got that raw live edge to it, which I was trying to get, as I spoke about earlier. That's been a big important thing
Yes, exactly.
for me to get in the studio. I think Red Eye captures that live edge that you want to get out of a studio recording for the rock and roll band anyway. So fine, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a fine album, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud to have played with Terry Horbury, who truly is one of the greatest guys you could ever meet, and still sadly lost, missed in the industry and by a lot of bands, not just the Vardis setup. But I know he had connections with so many different musicians, So yeah. But anyway, that got us to the Red Eye.
Yes, and then here we are with a new live album. Fortunately, you recorded just before the lockdown.
Yeah,
tell us the story about this.
I just can't believe how this band seems to everything we do seems to go to the edge. We always stand on the edge of the cliff and manage not to fall off. I don't know. It's crazy. I mean, if the band had been, I mean, I've been living in Greece now for a couple of years, down here in the Dodecanese Islands, and I've been here. So for me, we were seeing a lot of what was going on in Italy, and the Greek government was sort of monitoring the Italian situation very closely, which is very tragic. And I think a lot of people in Europe understood that this thing is very serious.
Yes.
Unfortunately, quite a few of our leading politicians in the United Kingdom are clowns, and basically but basically we're treating coronavirus as a bit of a joke, I have to say. And I couldn't believe this. I'm like, hey, what's going on? It's like, so not a lot had happened in the UK, and we were sort of being told on the news, the UK media, which I obviously monitor from here quite, especially with the internet. We all watch as national TVs these days, wherever we go in the world. You just log in and watch the news from home. That's what most people do. And I'm thinking, they're telling everybody it's some kind of a flu bug, that, it's nothing to worry about. And the Prime Minister's saying he's been shaking hands in the COVID wards, and all this thing. And I'm like, this ain't the vibe we're getting off the Greek government or the other European sort of nations are not saying this. What is going on? And it was all connected with America, this so-called special relationship between Britain and America and all this nonsense. But anyway, I was confused because we were the 100 Club and the band were getting lots of emails and lots of questions. Is the gig going ahead? Blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, we really have to do this if we can. And if there's a way of making, we were sort of feeling, I wanted to feel skeptical about COVID because I wanted to play. So it suited. you sort of don't want it to be as serious as I could see it in Greece. The way that the media were portraying it in the UK, in a way, suited the way musicians wanted to play, So I'd gone over for some rehearsals, and we did a warm-up show up in Doncaster, and it was fine. There didn't seem to be a major alert going on in the UK to that degree. even though I could sense over here that it was starting to get serious. And we'd not really known or seen anybody personally who'd had the illness, so it was still like, you know, a risk worth taking, and didn't really feel that it could be that bad at that time in 2020, based on the fact that, of course, we were being told it wasn't that bad by the government in Britain anyway. But anyway, we decided to play the show. We told people, yeah, we're going ahead. Luckily, a good number of people, it was a very healthy crowd that turned up, and came from all over. I mean, there were people coming in from Belgium, and as far as I know, mainland Europe, Scotland,
yes,
you know, they came
great.
down. And it was fantastic, really. And it was a really good, because we had no idea. Of course, a few people said because of the COVID thing, we can't risk it. And I don't blame them one bit, you know. But luckily, we managed to play that show and got through the set, and it was a good night. We enjoyed it, and the crowd enjoyed it, and we managed to get it recorded. It's strange, but that night we came off stage about 11 o'clock. We'd done a 2-hour set. And then on the news the next day, it said, tomorrow we're going to be locking down all the airports. And I'm like, my God, at last the penny's dropping. It is, you know, the fear of it being serious, we didn't want to believe. But as soon as we knew the airports were closing or being slowly closed down, we knew that something big was going to come.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And myself and Irene had got our flights booked back here to Greece the next day, and we went through Heathrow, and it was just desolate. You know, it's like something out of some post-apocalyptic movie. It was just incredible. I've never seen London still like that. You know, it was weird. It was like there was you could sense, it was palpable, the uncertainty. That's the word. Very strange. And but we'd got it in the can, and I don't know how we managed to do it. Thank God, as far as I'm aware, no one got ill, no one got the virus. So all the people that went to the show and so forth, and everyone, all the musicians were fine. So we managed to do it just in time. If we'd have been booked to play, it was Friday. They said, which date do you want? And I went, because I'm like that, really. If somebody says, do you want to play on the Saturday or the Friday? And I said, well, what are the dates? And I said, Friday the 13th. That's the date for me. Friday the 13th. I'm like that. I sort of go for pushing the buttons. I want to, you know, let's tempt it. But in a way, what a lucky day. You know, it's
absolutely,
like
it's
Friday the 13th. It's, my God, it's the luckiest date in rock and roll of 2020.
And do you plan to record the DVD? Was it filmed?
It was filmed. There were several cameras. The problem with the 100 Club, I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it's not the biggest venue in the world, and the tight spaces with the cameras to not get knocked by the fans and the whole sort of buzz. It's like really tight. You have to have the tripods and you have to fly it. And there was about 3 cameras, and a couple of the cameras actually went down. They got sort of knocked out of position, and so I don't think some of the footage is consistent. Whether there's enough there to do the whole DVD, I'm not sure at this stage, but I haven't seen it. I mean, Joe liaises that side for me, but yeah, I mean, we will be looking at it, and Fred, and we'll see. Maybe one day there'll be that, but no, as far as I know, it wasn't an easy show to record.
Yes.
Especially with our sort of music. You know, some of the artists in there, it's a lot easier if it's more acoustic, you know, unplugged, and the blues and the jazz stuff, and people are far more civilized. But when you start bouncing around a bit,
yes, it's difficult. And your DNA, as usual, is no overdubs guaranteed. how it's important for you.
Well, it's got to be, because I think coming out of the 70s, there were quite a few live albums. And I knew, having seen quite a few bands, and I'm not going to name names, but I know that some of those recordings were not wholly live recordings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they're very good, and I'm not criticizing, and everybody sort of did it. And I had a sort of argument with Logo Records over it, because there's obviously imperfections in my voice, in the odd bum note.
Of course.
You can't sort of leap about and swing it and let go musically and enjoy it with the fans and play perfect. I've yet to see an artist do that. It looks as though you are playing perfect at the time, in real time, but once you bring the tapes to the studio and analyze it, there's all sorts of bits and bobs that you would change. Now, some of them are good mistakes that actually give it enhancement, and then make it. It's the same that in the studio as well. You make a mistake and you leave it in because you think, oh, that really works. That sounds really cool, or whatever. But live, I just think it struck me that I didn't want to go in the studio and redub a section of vocal or something, for the original.
Yes, absolutely.
And I said to Logo Records, instead of trying to record the overdubs the way that it's been standard procedure in the 70s for bands to perfect these live albums, why don't we just put a sticker on saying that we don't care? We don't care that there's an odd mistake here or something slightly out of pitch. It's because it's what it is. It's a moment in time, and it's a document of that moment. And we have to be honest to ourselves and to the people who are going to buy this record.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think Logo were a bit taken back with this request. They were like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Well, yeah, because actually I enjoyed. I knew we played well on 100 miles an hour, the original, and I enjoyed it. And I think I don't mind people seeing the imperfections. I like the thought of it on a live album, and it's sort of the difference between going to live theatre to see an actor perform and going to the movies to see an actor perform, where the directors made the actor say the scene or the lines several times. It's a different technique, isn't it? Whereas on a live theatre stage, if you watch someone doing Shakespeare or whatever, it can be sort of a lot different in a way, because they're having to mold their performance into circumstances live, and that's what we do as musicians. And I thought, let's just put it out as it is, and obviously balance the sounds, make it,
of course,
edit it in terms of the timeline, because as you know, you can only get about 20-25 minutes each side on vinyl. A lot of my chit chat and nonsense that comes out when I'm talking, a lot of that, you can get rid of some of that. I know that a lot of people like all that, and we have left a fair bit in, but in reality, it's about the music. So we've got to get this music on both sides of two 12-inch vinyl discs, and basically that's why you've got to edit the timeline. But in terms of actually listening to it and going, I want to replay that guitar solo, or I want to do this, we didn't go there. That we just out. That's the performance is real, and that's all we wanted. Now, I'm not criticizing other bands by saying it's really, I think people have to enjoy albums for what they are, and a lot of live albums that have been dubbed are fantastic, and they deservedly get a lot of recognition, and I've no problem with it. It's just for me and for the Vardis sound. No, I think there might be an element of the punky sort of influence from the early 70s, when all the punk bands, when we put his own label together, and it's like a DIY thing, isn't it? You do it, you make it happen.
Absolutely.
It's a punk attitude.
So what are the next plans? I haven't seen any gig planned on your site. So do you plan to play some concerts?
Yeah, we've had a couple of shows that were booked back in 2019, and they got postponed because of the COVID in 2020.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And we feel it's we really want to like obviously play live again, and it's, I mean, at the moment, I don't know if you're aware in your media, but there's sort of talk at the moment from the UK about potentially more lockdowns occurring and this and that. So for me to travel 2,000 miles from here for a show, and to book the studio and then play the shows or whatever, get together to do that over in the UK or in Northern Europe, it demands that there's some kind of stability on a political level, if you see what I mean, because I can't really imagine going over to UK at the moment and then getting locked down and sort of not being able to get back to my family here, you know, my wife here and stuff. Yes. And it's a very delicate decision at the moment. Now, we did have a show booked for November, but it was too soon, and when we looked at the possibilities, and at the moment, as I've said, we've got this sort of a level of uncertainty in the UK with the potential lockdowns. So we have got something booked for the spring next year through the Hard Rock Hell people, which we're hoping to confirm very soon.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that we're going to be playing the Hard Rock Hell festival, and hopefully around that we'll try and slot some shows, maybe club shows. I'm desperate to try and get. There's a couple of inquiries, as far as I'm aware, that have come from Belgium and France. So with a little bit of luck, you never know, we might be popping over the channel to do a show in the spring, or a couple of shows before we do the Hard Rock Hell. So yeah, I mean, we're desperate. We're all desperate, and I'm not the only musician, I'm sure, that said that to you. We all want to play as much as we can again, but we just need to see a bit of stability, because I mean, Joe lives up in Newcastle, Rolly lives down in London, and I live over here in the most eastern part of Europe that you can get. I'm literally, I can literally swim over to Turkey from here. It's ridiculous, but it's where we are. It's what we want, and yeah, I'm desperate to get back with the guys and back in the studio as well, and start working on backing tracks for a new album. I mean, I've got my studio here, which is great, and we did some of the prep work for the Red Eye album here as well, with Terry. But so I'm hoping one way or the other, next year for sure, we at some point we'll be together in the studio working on new material. Definitely.
Great.
Whether it's in the UK or whether it's down here in Kalymnos. And yeah, touch wood, we'll be I'll be over in the UK for the spring, preparing for this Hard Rock Hell show, and hopefully that will be announced soon on the news feed of the website and social media. But as I've said to many people who've inquired, buy tickets by all means, but don't expect to see Vardis live based on someone saying we're playing. Make sure it's come through the official website and the official social media channels of the Vardis band. Otherwise, you know, you might be disappointed, and I wouldn't want that in a million years. I don't want to let anybody down, you know. It's difficult. It's difficult, you know, because obviously I feel so much for the promoters and the whole of the music business and entertainment business as a whole. It's been decimated with the COVID, hasn't it? You know, the venues, the clubs, it's terrible.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Steve, for all these informations about your career, the live album. We hope you the best. We love a lot this new album.
Yeah, you've listened to the whole thing.
It will be the album of the month on our media. Hey. So thank you very much. And we hope to see you, of course, live here in France, but I know it's difficult. So
they can get in, anyone interested in inquiries can get in touch with us. We've got the email addresses on the website and all the rest of it. Just drop us a line, and you know, if it's feasible, if it's possible, yes, we'll be there. We'll come and play in France, no problem. You know, I'd love to. Really.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Steve.
Take care. Great to speak to you. Bye.
Bye.